Hi, and welcome back to Vital. I'm Val, your host, and I speak on things in wellness, things that aren't so well in wellness, and everything in between. So, because I am a certified hater, we are gathered here today to discuss titanium dioxide, which is a little ingredient that is found in everything from food to cosmetics to tampons. We waste no time here, so let's get right into it. So, titanium dioxide comes from minerals. It naturally occurs in ore and it will be mined and then processed, and it will get reacted with either sulfuric acid or chlorine, and then it gets turned into titanium dioxide. So it has a very particular set of attributes that makes it extremely attractive to manufacturers and extremely detrimental to us. And one such attribute is the ability to whiten the ever loving shit out of just about anything. It's an incredibly effective whitening agent. So think things like makeup and sunscreen and those protein and supplement powders and things like cotton. So, one of these qualities is actually what makes it so difficult to replace with non toxic alternatives in products is the fact that it has a high refractive index. And that just means that it is able to bend and scatter light exceptionally well. So, quick physics lesson. So, when I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, by the way. So, when light hits a surface with a high refractive index, it slows down and it changes direction and it scatters light in multiple directions. So, with a low refractive index surface, the light will go, it will hit the surface and it will kind of bend like a little bit, but mostly still kind of straight. With a high refractive index surface, the light will hit it and it will take a more drastic turn and it will also spread in different directions. And titanium dioxide also actually has a small particle size. And on top of that, the particle surface area is such that light will bounce off of it multiple times. So this makes the surface of whatever titanium dioxide is on or in look super bright and very opaque. So, if you use makeup, you will understand why this is such a common ingredient in things like foundations and concealers. And that is because it is able to mask imperfections exceptionally well by reflecting light off of the surface of the skin. So, I just moved from Texas to New York City, which means that mentally I am in a winter wonderland. So imagine titanium dioxide like snow on a sunny day. And when sunlight hits this beautiful, fresh, pillowy snow, it reflects and scatters light in all directions. And it makes the snow appear very white and almost blindingly bright. So, titanium dioxide works pretty much the same way in products. It catches and throws light in all different directions like a little disco ball, making the appearance of whatever it's in look very bright and white. It's also pretty chemically stable, which means that it is not going to react very easily with other substances and it's not going to degrade quickly or easily either. So it maintains that white color for quite a long time. It also has some good natural UV filtering properties. So it's often used as a physical sunscreen via its nanoparticle form. And like I just mentioned, it reflects light very well. So it doesn't absorb these UV rays, they just bounce right off of it. And if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Titanium dioxide is banned in the European Union due to concerns of it being a carcinogen, which basically just means it could potentially cause cancer. Specifically, it is a group 2B carcinogen, which means that there is some evidence that it is cancerous to humans. This is not 100% conclusive though, but it has less to do with the science on it and more to do with bureaucratic processes. Like I mentioned before, because it is generally recognized as safe by the FDA, like we talked about in the last episode, there really is no incentive to produce more studies around it, despite smaller and just like minor studies coming out that it could potentially be cancerous. So, generally, this category is just something to steer clear of. You can look up a list online of all 2B carcinogens and what different products are classified as that. But aside from the cancer allegations, there are honestly other bigger issues with titanium dioxide. So, let's get into those. So, like I mentioned earlier, titanium dioxide has a very small particle size, and in most formulations, it is used in its nanoparticle form. This is a small enough size to be absorbed through the skin or to get into the bloodstream when it's ingested in things like food or supplements. So, to be more specific, nanoparticles like this can penetrate membranes. We have membranes everywhere in the body, so titanium dioxide can really affect the whole body, but there are definitely some specific areas of concern. I'm sure you've already heard about the importance of gut health from everyone and their mom on the internet, so I will save you that spiel at least until a later date when I do a whole episode on it. But pretty much it is absolutely critical to our immune health and overall well-being. So, we have something called a gut lining, which is this protective barrier that is made up of cells, and they are linked together by tight junctions, which are these specialized protein structures that are very close together and they form almost kind of like a seal. And this keeps a bunch of unwanted crap out. So, let's draw another little diagram. Lucky you, everyone gets to witness my amazing artistic skills again. So we have the gut barrier, and it is made up of these cells. And in between these cells is these tight junctions that are forming a seal in between, almost kind of like a zipper, if you will, to seal this up so that things can't get through. However, then we have things like titanium dioxide that come along and they dig into the membranes of these tight junctions. And it weasels its way in like an uninvited house guest, like that one weird uncle at Thanksgiving. And it causes these little fissures or little holes in the tight junctions, which are here now. So it'll go like this. So basically, think of it kind of like what hairspray did to the ozone layer in the 80s. So, when there are holes in the tight junctions, it means that things like bacteria and toxins and parasites and even undigested food can get into our bloodstream. So now we have all these little critters floating around and getting into the bloodstream. And our bloodstream has white blood cells, which play a protective role. And when they recognize these little space invaders, they go on high alert and they're like, Houston, we have a problem. And they dispatch the inflammatory response. So I'm sure you can kind of see where I'm going with this. When the gut allows things to leak in, also a condition known as leaky gut syndrome, then it leads to chronic inflammation. And the body is going to be constantly fighting off everything that it's exposed to, even if it's not necessarily harmful. So, this is where we see the development of autoimmune conditions, food allergies, and food sensitivities, and not even just the really extreme kind, like with hives and anaphylactic shock, but even the more mild reactions that you see in sensitivities. So, with things like gluten, oftentimes you will see bloating or like stomach ache or like digestive discomfort, or just be physically inflamed, like where the face gets kind of puffy. And these are all really common reactions when the gut barrier is compromised. So, on top of this inflammatory response, titanium dioxide can also disrupt the balance of the microbiome in our body. The way that it does this is actually really, really interesting. So, of course, because the gut is now allowing in harmful bacteria, that is going to naturally disrupt the balance of good bacteria. Because the nanoparticles of titanium dioxide are so small, they can actually invade the bacteria's cell body and wreak all sorts of havoc. And it can actually ultimately lead to the cell death of those bacteria, especially ones like lactobacillus, which is a really common one found in our gut. It's actually one that you'll see very frequently in like probiotics as well. But what's even more crazy is that it can actually interfere with the bacteria's communication processes or their signaling pathways. And this can be extremely damaging because bacteria will sometimes work together in a group and they will need to communicate in order to create biofilms or other group projects. And one of the more interesting effects is actually that it can change the gene expression of the microbes. So let's say that a certain bacteria has the ability to stick to the gut or interact with your cells in a very particular way, or maybe produce a specific kind of biofilm. Titanium dioxide can actually change these aspects of the bacteria so that they will behave and interact with your body in a completely different way. So obviously, this can be very detrimental because we rely on these bacteria to perform certain tasks in our body to keep a healthy environment of the gut flora. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, new research is showing that these particles don't just make their way out of your system, they can actually accumulate in the body, specifically in organs like your liver, your kidneys, and your spleen. And these particles can actually even pass the blood brain barrier and accumulate in your brain tissue. So while your foundation might look flawless and your tampons are wider than the Alabama sorority rush, titanium dioxide is setting up shop in your brain to cause inflammation. So, another extremely concerning aspect of titanium dioxide, especially for anyone who is looking to become pregnant and have children, is the fact that research is now showing that these nanoparticles can actually have an effect on fetal development. So, of course, we still need a lot more studies done on this, but the early research is concerning enough that honestly, if you are looking to become pregnant or maintain your fertility, I would just take extra care to avoid this ingredient. Even before you think about having kids, because like I said, this can bioaccumulate in the body and cause long term issues. So I just really urge you guys to read those ingredient labels. These companies do not give a fuck about you, and titanium dioxide is found in prenatal vitamins, which prenatal vitamins are like horrible to start with, but titanium dioxide just really takes it over the edge. All right, so continuing on through this wasteland, when titanium dioxide is applied to the skin, especially in its nanoparticle form, it does not just sit on the surface. No. In an ironic plot twist from hell, these tiny particles can penetrate the skin barrier. And then when they are exposed to sunlight, aka UV rays, they generate something called free radicals. Once again, check out my free radical episode and oxidative stress episode if you haven't yet. I go in super in depth on it. But in essence, free radicals are unstable molecules that can cause damage to the cells. They're super reactive and they can lead to oxidative stress, which is just this imbalance of free radicals and antioxidants in the body. So, this imbalance can result in tissue damage, cellular dysfunction, and wait for it, premature aging of the skin, inflammation, and skin disorders, including skin cancer. Love that. So this is actually a huge reason why I do not advocate and I am not a fan of like 99% of the sunscreens on the market. So just as a little caveat, these nanoparticles can actually be coated to reduce the potential formation of free radicals, but it does not altogether eliminate it. And this effect actually becomes really amplified when you're using multiple products on your face and on your body and just over an extended period of time. So you're slathering on sunscreen and foundation and makeup, and then you're also taking it in supplement form. All of that adds up. So, why is this abomination still allowed to be used? You might recall a little classification called GRAS from the last episode. And you guessed it, titanium dioxide is generally recognized as safe, which is an act that offends every god that exists and perhaps a few that don't. So, when titanium dioxide was first granted GRAS status, it was primarily evaluated for its role as a whitening agent in food used in really, really low concentrations. And at the time, it was deemed safe because it occurred naturally in minerals, it was chemically stable, there were no immediate health effects that could be noticed. Like, no one died when taking it at those levels, and no one had observed any negative effects during its use in cosmetics and paint. So, everyone assumed it was fine and dandy. However, the long term risks, particularly when used in nanoparticle form, were not considered, probably because I don't think it existed at the time that titanium was granted the status, and it has not been reevaluated for the nanoparticle form. But as science advanced and researchers discovered that the nanoparticles could behave differently in the body, that obviously raised concerns about how titanium dioxide might penetrate tissues, disrupt the gut lining, interact with our cells. But despite all of these new findings, titanium dioxide remains to be just incredibly deeply entrenched in consumer products. The good news is that despite the FDA being borderline useless, the free market gives us the beautiful gift of choice. And there are safer alternatives out there. So if you're looking for sunscreen, I would personally opt for something like zinc oxide instead. Zinc oxide is another physical sunblock that forms a barrier on top of your skin and reflects the UV rays, but it doesn't generate free radicals in the same way that titanium dioxide does when exposed to the sun. For cosmetics, I have seen a couple companies move away from titanium dioxide and use something called kaolin clay. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't actually use it, but that is an ingredient and it can have similar effects that gives it this uh, bright look, but also gives it like a mattifying effect. And it has a lot of oil absorbing properties. So that actually even benefits the skin more. So, for food and supplements, it gets a little bit trickier. Titanium dioxide is often used as a whitening agent in processed foods and also as an anti caking agent. So, like things don't stick together, especially powders and supplements. But if you're paying attention to ingredient labels, and you should be, then you will be able to find products that use rice powder or silica or natural starches as alternatives. So, I will always advocate for staying away from processed and packaged foods. However, with titanium dioxide, it does become increasingly more difficult because it is not just in, stuff that has been processed to hell and back, but it's found in our supplements and, protein powders and these things that we think are healthy for us. So it just becomes increasingly more important to read food labels. And it is still used widely in makeup and personal care products. And when it comes to makeup, I don't know about you, but if you've ever had to read makeup packaging, the text is so tiny. I feel like you need a literal microscope to see it. So it does get a little bit trickier, but there are definitely brands out there that are moving in a more natural direction. I think that consumers are becoming a lot more diligent about recognizing the health effects of these ingredients. And yeah, I would just encourage you to read labels. There are a couple of apps that I know that have become popular over the years, like the Environmental Working Group or EWG. They have this database where you can scan something and look at the health effects of it. However, I would not fully trust it because they do not list titanium dioxide as an ingredient of concern, which pretty much already invalidates the entire app for me. Titanium dioxide is one of the worst ones out there, in my opinion. And I believe that EWG rates it like a one, which is like very good out of their 10. Not to totally go off on a tangent about the environmental working group, but they do some good work. They're the ones that publish the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, which is this yearly or bi-yearly effort that tests the pesticides in our food and lets us know which foods are most likely to have a higher use of pesticides, and we need to get organic versus ones that are using less, and maybe we can stick with conventional. And they also have like a really good water database where they test the toxins in our public water supply. So they do good work, but you can't just trust one organization and that be your end all be all. The EWG specifically, I take issue with because they have a lot of affiliate links on their website, which I understand that they need funding, but I think that this can actually cause bias and skew their rating system a little bit. So I am definitely hoping for apps to come out that are a lot less biased and maybe don't use affiliate links. Like I said, I understand the need for that. There are even companies I would like to be affiliated with, but ultimately, for an organization of that size, I think it does start to skew results a little bit. And we have seen that. And kind of one of my other qualms with EWG is that I have found that the studies that they link to support their final decision very much skews towards the same type of studies that the FDA looks at, which I think oftentimes can be funded by the industry or influenced by the industry at least. And I think that there are other more cutting edge emerging studies that are coming out that are not being considered, especially with titanium dioxide and its effects on gut health. So, with that, I would encourage you as a little project just to go out to the store and look at some of your favorite products, see if you can spot titanium dioxide in it, and just try to look for alternatives because there are lots of brands that are moving away from using it. So I will be sure to link any relevant links in the show notes below. I have a couple really fun episodes coming out in the coming weeks around fragrance and its toxic effects on your hormones, and also the effects of different types of artificial food dyes. So make sure you follow along anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether that's YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And yeah, find me on socials as well. So fuck the FDA, and until next time.